Here we have AP calculus AB problem. Okay, let's go to the question. The graph of f prime is shown in the figure above. Which of the following statements about f are true? The first statement is f has a relative minimum at x equals to a. The second statement, f has a relative maximum at x equals to b. And the third statement, f is decreasing on the interval b less than x less than c. Okay, here we have to be very careful with the graph, because this is not the graph of f of x. This is the graph of f prime of x, which is the first derivative of the function f of x. Okay, now let me consider the original function f of x. If the function f of x has relative extrema, either relative maximum or relative minimum at some value of x, say x equals to a or x equals to b, okay, then the first derivative of the function f prime of x must be equal to 0 at these values of x. Then only we can say that the function f of x has a relative extrema at these values of x. Okay, so how do I know that f prime of x becomes 0 when x equals to a or x equals to b? For that, we have to consider the x-intercept of the graph of the f prime of x. Here we have the graph of f prime of x, that is y equals to f prime of x. Let's look at the x-intercept of the graph over here. X-intercept means a point at where the graph intersects x-axis. Here the graph of f prime of x intersects x-axis over here at x equals to a. So this is the x-intercept. At this point, x coordinate is a and y coordinate always 0. At x-intercept, or at the point at where the graph intersects x-axis, the y coordinate is 0. So here y coordinate is 0, but y equals to f prime of x. When y is equal to 0, f prime of x equals to 0. Clearly, when x equals to a, the first derivative f prime of x becomes 0. So clearly, the original function f of x has a relative extrema at x equals to a. Now we have to decide the relative extrema at x equals to a for the function f of x is relative minimum or relative maximum, because it has been specified over here. For that, we can consider the graph of the function f prime of x over here at x equals to a. Now let's consider the graph of f prime of x on the left side of a. When I consider the graph of f prime of x on the left side of a, it's below the x-axis. Here the value of y is less than 0, that is negative. Always the y coordinate is negative or below the x-axis. Y is less than 0 means f prime of x is less than 0, because we know that the y and f prime of x are equal. Since y is less than 0 below the x-axis and f prime of x is less than 0 on the left side of a. Okay, now let's consider the values on the right side of a over here. We find the graph above the x-axis. Above the x-axis means y is greater than 0. That means f prime of x is greater than 0. Let me write over here. Okay, now let's consider the graph at x equals to a. So on the left side of x equals to a, f prime of x is less than 0. That is the slope of the graph f of x is negative. The slope of the graph of f of x is negative, then it has to be decreasing on the left side of a. So here f prime of x is less than 0. That means the original function f of x is decreasing because the slope is negative. So decreasing means we have to come down like this. From when you look at the graph, actually this is a graph of f of x. Okay, when you look at the graph of f of x from left side to right side, it's going down. That is decreasing because here f prime of x is less than 0. Now this is a point at x equals to a. Now let's consider the values of x on the right side of a. We find the graph of first derivative above the x-axis, that is y is greater than 0, that is the slope is positive. So slope is positive means f of x is increasing, that is it must go up over here, because f prime of x over here is positive. Okay, now consider the point at x equals to a for the function f of x. Is it minimum or maximum? Clearly it's minimum, because we have this point at the bottom. Already we know that we have a relative extrema for f of x at x equals to a. Since this point is minimum at x equals to a, we have a relative minimum at x equals to a for the function f of x. So this is exactly said by the statement 1, that is f has a relative minimum at x equals to a. So the first statement is true. Okay, now let's verify the second statement, that is f has a relative minimum at x equals to b. So if the function f of x has a relative maximum, that is relative extrema at x equals to b, then f prime of x must be equal to 0. That is the graph of f prime of x must have x-intercept at x equals to b. That is the graph of this function must intersect the x-axis at x equals to b. But here when I look at the graph of f prime of x, it does not intersect the x-axis at x equals to b. Since the graph of f prime of x does not intersect x-axis at x equals to b, so then f prime of x does not become 0 when x equals to b. Since f prime of x does not become 0 when x equals to b, there is no relative maximum at x for f of x at x equals to b. So the statement 2 is false. Okay, now let's go to statement 3. That is f is decreasing on the interval b less than x less than c. Let's consider the interval over here. This is the interval mentioned over here, b less than x less than c. So in this interval, the third statement says the graph of the original function f of x is decreasing. Now to check this statement 3 is true or false, consider the graph given over here for f prime of x and consider the value of y in this interval b to c. Actually, in this interval b less than x less than c, we find the graph of f prime of x above the x-axis. So if I consider any point over here between b and c, the value of y is positive because we find the graph above the x-axis. Above the x-axis, always the y coordinate is positive. So that is, if y is positive, that is y is greater than 0, then f prime of x must be positive. That is, f prime of x must be greater than 0. So that is, the slope of the original function f of x is positive in this interval b less than x less than c. Since the slope of the original function f is positive, f must be increasing in this interval. But the statement 3 says f is decreasing. So this one is also false. So among the given 3 statements, only the first statement is true. So we find one only in answer choice B. The correct answer choice for this question is B.